Breaking news tonight. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that could change the face of American democracy forever. The order requires every voter in the United States to present a government-issued photo ID at the polls. More controversially, it bans almost all voting by mail, allowing exceptions only for active military service members and the seriously ill. Trump defended the measure as necessary to protect what he calls the integrity of our elections. But critics say it is the most aggressive voter suppression effort in modern history. The announcement was delivered from the White House East Room, with Trump standing proudly at the podium, holding up the signed order for cameras. "From this day forward," he declared, "we will secure our elections like never before. No more fraud, no more cheating, only fair and honest votes." Supporters in the audience cheered, chanting his name, while conservative media outlets rushed to praise the decision as a long-overdue step. But outside the White House, protesters gathered within hours. Civil rights groups warned that millions of Americans could lose their right to vote under the new rules. Elderly citizens, low-income workers, and students, many of whom rely on mail-in ballots or lack the required ID, are now at risk of being silenced. "This is not about protecting democracy," one activist shouted through a megaphone. "This is about protecting Donald Trump." Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was quick to respond. Standing before reporters, she thundered, "The president has declared war on the American voter. He is not safeguarding our democracy, he is strangling it. This is an assault on our freedoms, and history will remember it as one of the darkest moments in American politics." As the nation absorbs the shock, questions multiply. Can such an order even withstand legal challenges? Will the courts strike it down? And most importantly, what happens to a democracy when millions of its citizens are told their voices no longer count? The fallout from Trump's executive order was immediate and explosive, reaching far beyond America's borders. In capitals across Europe, leaders expressed shock that the United States, long seen as a beacon of democracy, was now taking steps many described as authoritarian. The German chancellor declared that democracy does not begin with walls and restrictions. It begins with trust in the people. In France, the president warned that America was abandoning its own values by making it harder, not easier, for citizens to vote. Headlines across European newspapers carried words like suppression, power grab, and dictatorship. Canada, America's closest neighbor, voiced rare criticism. Prime ministerial officials cautioned that limiting mail-in ballots could disenfranchise millions, undermining the credibility of U.S. elections. In the United Kingdom, Parliament erupted in debate, with members from across parties questioning whether America could still call itself the leader of the free world. For decades, Washington had pressured other nations to respect democratic rights. Now those same allies openly accused the United States of betraying them. Meanwhile, in Latin America and Asia, critics were even harsher. Leaders in Mexico described the move as a dagger to the heart of democracy, while activists in South Korea compared Trump's actions to the tactics of authoritarian regimes. International watchdog groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch issued urgent statements warning that the United States was setting a dangerous precedent. Back home, Jasmine Crockett amplified these criticisms with her own fiery words. "When the world looks at us now," she said, "they no longer see a shining example of freedom. They see a president willing to silence his own people for power. Trump doesn't want history to remember democracy. He wants history to remember him." Her comments were replayed across global media, turning Crockett into an unexpected international figure. The stage was set for a political battle with global consequences. Trump had framed his order as a defense of America. His opponents framed it as the death of democracy itself, and the world was watching. Inside the United States, the executive order ignited a firestorm unlike anything seen in years. Protests erupted overnight in cities from New York to Los Angeles. Outside courthouses, college campuses, and state capitals, crowds gathered carrying signs that read, "Let us vote," "Democracy denied," and "Trump equals tyranny." Elderly citizens in wheelchairs, veterans in uniform, students with backpacks, all marched side by side, united by a fear that their voices were being erased. For millions of Americans, the right to vote is not just a civic duty. It is the lifeline that connects them to power. Now that lifeline seemed to be cut, civil rights organizations scrambled to respond. Lawyers from the ACLU and NAACP announced immediate lawsuits, calling the order unconstitutional. "This is not security," one attorney declared in a fiery press conference. "This is suppression, and we will fight it in every court across this nation." Local election officials warned that the new rules would create chaos at polling stations, with long lines, mass confusion, and millions turned away. At grocery stores and barber shops, people debated what the order really meant. A single mother in Ohio told reporters, "I work 2 jobs. I don't have time to wait for hours at the DMV just to get an ID. Now I can't vote? That's not freedom. That's punishment." In Texas, a veteran who had voted by mail for decades because of his disability broke down in tears. "I fought for this country, but now my country won't let me vote." Jasmine Crockett seized on these stories, amplifying them in speeches and interviews. "This is not about fraud," she said. "It's about fear. Trump fears the people, so he's trying to silence them. But the people will not be silenced." Her words resonated on social media, where hashtags like #LetUsVote and #TrumpTheTyrant began trending. The nation was at a crossroads. For the forgotten voter, the student, the worker, the disabled veteran, this was not an abstract debate. It was personal. It was survival. And as anger spread, so too did a sense that America's greatest fight was no longer with foreign enemies, but with itself. In Washington, the political earthquake reached a new intensity as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett delivered her most blistering speech yet. Standing on the steps of the Capitol, surrounded by supporters and a swarm of cameras, she declared, "Donald Trump has turned the presidency into a business deal, and the American people are paying the price. He is not guarding democracy. He is auctioning it off to his ego." Her words echoed across live broadcasts, immediately trending online and sparking heated debates on every major network. Crockett's fury was not just directed at Trump's executive order, but at the pattern it revealed. First, he tried to control the courts. Then, he tried to control the press. Now, he is trying to control your vote. This is not leadership. It is dictatorship, step by step. Supporters erupted in applause, some chanting, "Resign," while others held banners reading "Crockett for the people." The moment crystallized a growing sentiment that this fight was no longer about policy, but about survival. Trump, predictably, fired back on social media within hours. In a string of posts, he labeled Crockett a radical liar and claimed her speeches were paid propaganda. But his response only amplified her platform. Cable news played her sound bites on loop, framing the clash as a defining battle for the soul of the nation. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans latched onto Crockett's message. In living rooms and diners, people repeated her words, describing Trump not as a president, but as a tyrant in waiting. Editorials compared her stance to historic moments of resistance, likening her speeches to those of leaders who had once stood against authoritarian threats. The impact was undeniable. Crockett had transformed from a fiery opposition figure into a symbol of defiance. She represented the millions who felt abandoned, silenced, or ignored. And while Trump basked in the spotlight of his executive order, Crockett's fury turned that spotlight into a weapon, exposing his motives, questioning his legitimacy and igniting a movement that threatened to outgrow even his vast political machine. While Trump framed his executive order as a defense of democracy, his actions on the global stage told a different story. Traveling abroad, he presented himself as a bold reformer, boasting to foreign leaders that America was finally fixing its broken elections. At summits, he held up his order as evidence of strength, comparing it to anti-fraud measures in other countries. Cameras captured him smiling, shaking hands, basking in the attention of world press. For Trump, it was a performance of control, a stage play in which he cast himself as the hero of electoral integrity. But back home, the pain was mounting. Local election offices warned they lacked the resources to implement the sweeping ID requirements. Lines at DMVs stretched for hours, with frustrated citizens turned away without the proper paperwork. In rural towns, elderly voters struggled to travel long distances just to secure identification. Meanwhile, college students, once enthusiastic participants in democracy, faced new barriers that made it nearly impossible to cast ballots. The economic strain deepened the crisis. Lawsuits piled up, costing states millions of dollars. Small businesses saw sales drop as consumer confidence faltered, shaken by political unrest. Families faced higher prices at the grocery store, and yet the White House seemed deaf to their struggles. "He's out there bragging about himself," said one Ohio factory worker, "while we're the ones living with the consequences." Jasmine Crockett seized on these contrasts. Speaking at a packed rally in Philadelphia, she thundered, "Trump wants the Nobel Prize, but Americans just want to pay their bills. He wants headlines in history books, but Americans want food on their tables. He thinks democracy is a trophy, but for us, it's survival." Her words brought the crowd to its feet, echoing across social media and fueling a growing movement. The gap between Trump's global theater and America's local pain became impossible to ignore. For ordinary citizens, the executive order was not a symbol of strength, but a daily burden. And for Trump, the pursuit of personal glory left behind a trail of broken promises, fractured communities, and a democracy on the brink of collapse. As weeks passed, cracks began to spread through the facade of Trump's order. Whispers circulated in Washington that even some within his inner circle doubted the legality of the sweeping mandate. Anonymous aides leaked stories of heated arguments inside the West Wing, where advisors warned the president that the courts could strike down the order entirely. But Trump, ever defiant, dismissed the warnings, insisting history would remember him as the leader who saved democracy from chaos. On the streets, however, rumors took on a life of their own. Social media buzzed with unverified claims that Trump planned to deploy the National Guard to enforce ID checks at polling stations, that secret databases were being built to track voters, that the next election might be delayed or even canceled. None of these claims were confirmed, yet their circulation revealed the depth of public distrust. For many Americans, the line between fact and fear had dissolved. Civil rights groups reported growing harassment of voters trying to obtain IDs, with some states accused of deliberately slowing the process. Lawsuits multiplied, and federal judges issued temporary injunctions, only for the administration to appeal within hours. The legal battle created confusion so deep that ordinary citizens no longer knew whether their votes would count. Jasmine Crockett fanned the flames with fiery speeches. "We are watching democracy rot in real time," she declared. "Every day this order stands, America loses a piece of itself. Trump does not want free elections. He wants controlled elections. And controlled elections are not democracy. They are dictatorship." Her words, replayed across television networks, struck a chord with millions who felt abandoned and betrayed. Even some Republicans began to waver, quietly acknowledging that the backlash could damage their own futures. Governors in swing states expressed unease, distancing themselves from the White House while trying to calm local outrage. The once solid ground beneath Trump's order was beginning to fracture. The question now was no longer if America would resist, but how long the system could withstand the pressure before it snapped. By the time autumn arrived, the battle lines were unmistakable. Trump's executive order had ignited a storm that reached every corner of the nation. In Washington, lawsuits piled higher each day. In small towns, voters wondered if their voices would ever be heard again. On social media, the fight raged 24 hours a day, splitting families, friendships, and communities. And yet, amid the chaos, one voice rose above the noise: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. On a crisp evening in Atlanta, she delivered a speech that would become her defining moment. Standing before a sea of supporters, her voice cut through the air with the clarity of a warning bell. "Donald Trump believes democracy is his property," she said. "He thinks he can lock it up, put his name on it, and sell it back to you like one of his towers. But democracy doesn't belong to Donald Trump. It belongs to you." The crowd erupted in cheers, their chants of "Let us vote" shaking the city streets. Crockett pressed on, striking directly at the heart of Trump's motives. He wants history books to praise him. He wants awards and prizes. He wants statues in his honor. But the American people don't care about his ego. They care about feeding their families, paying their bills, and sending their kids to school. He has forgotten the people, and that is why the people must not forget him. The speech spread instantly across television screens and smartphones, replayed by millions who saw in her words a reflection of their own anger and hope. For some, it was a rallying cry. For others, it was a warning of what was at stake. And for Trump, it was a reminder that his greatest challenge was not the courts, nor the protests, but the power of a united people refusing to be silenced. Crockett's final words echoed into the night. Democracy is not a gift from presidents. It is a promise kept by citizens. If we stand together, no order, no law, no man can take it away. The future is ours. Do not let it be stolen